chapter 1, verses 26, it states, in the 6th month, God sent the angel Gabriel to Nazareth, the town of Galilee, to a virgin pledged to be married to a man named Joseph, a descendant of David. The virgin's name was Mary. The angel went to her and said, "Greetings, you are the highly favored. The Lord is with you." Mary was greatly troubled at his words and wondered what kind of greeting this might be. But the angel said to her, "Do not be afraid, Mary. You have found favor with God. You will be with child and give birth to a son, and you are to give him the name Jesus. He will be great, and he will be called the Son of the Most High. The Lord God will give him the throne of his father David, and he will reign over the house of Jacob forever. His kingdom will never end." "How will this be?" Mary asked the angel, "since I am a virgin?" The angel answered, "The Holy Spirit will come upon you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. So the Holy One to be born will be called the Son of God. Even Elizabeth, your relative, is going to have a child in her old age, and she who was said to be barren in her 6th month, for nothing is impossible with God. I am the Lord's servant." Mary answered, "May it be to me as you have said." Then the angel left her.
So we're in week 4 of our Travel Light series. This morning, the first Sunday we talked about letting go of stuff. Then we talked about letting go of bitterness. Then we talked about letting go of, what was last week? What was it? I got distracted. I couldn't remember. Just letting go of distraction. And today we're going to talk about letting go of control. Anybody? I mean, we have any control freaks in here? Don't reach over and lift up your neighbor's hand. That would make you, well, it's hard sometimes to not be a control freak. Because that's one of the things that we do as humans when we feel like things are not going the way we want them to go. When we feel out of control, when we feel insecure, we want to arrange our lives, right? The way they need to be, the way we want them to be. It's one of the things that we do when we have trouble trusting that God is in control. So we want to be in control. So let's talk about letting go of control. We're going to look at that scripture that Landon read for us. It's in Luke chapter 1, if you want to turn there. We're just going to talk just a few minutes about that. Last Sunday I preached way too long. There's no excuse for that. No excuse at all. So just so that I don't use up your allotted church time and so you can come back tonight, I'm not going to preach that long this morning. I don't want to, I know some of you can only be in church for so long, so I want to leave some time for tonight. So it talks about there in verse 26 of Luke chapter 1, talks about Elizabeth being pregnant and says, nothing is impossible with God. And Gabriel appears to Mary and says, "Greetings, favored woman, the Lord is with you," there in verse 28. And then in verse 29 it says that Mary was confused and disturbed. Confused and disturbed. Now, that is natural, right? I mean, an angel appears to you and says, even though you're a virgin, you're going to be pregnant, and it's going to be God, and you're going to give birth to him, and you're going to call him, he's going to be a descendant of King David. You're engaged to be married to this guy, and so it says Mary was confused and disturbed and tried to think, what could the angel mean? Well, Gabriel didn't stutter, but it's still hard to understand, right? It's what's going on? Why is this happening? Don't understand this. A lot of you guys would have probably said, "Now hang on there, Gabriel. Don't get ahead of yourself. That's not exactly how I had my life planned out." Well, the angel said, "Don't be afraid," right? Don't be afraid. You found favor with God. You're going to give birth to a son. You know that Landon just read all that for us. So I'm not going to be, I'm going to read all of that. But there in verse 38, Mary said, after the angel said, here's how it's going to go, what did Mary say in verse 38? She said, I am, depends on your translation, I'm the servant of the Lord, I'm the slave of the Lord, I'm the maidservant of the Lord. And then some translations say, may it be to me. But I prefer to think that Mary was a Beatles fan. And so I like the translation that says, let it be to me. Some of you old people get that. Let it be to me according to your word. Let it be. Mary surrendered to God's will, didn't she? She said, whatever you want, Lord, I'm okay. Even though I don't understand, I'm a little confused, it's a little scary. Whatever you want, let it be. Have you ever said that to God? Have you ever said, I don't really understand God. I don't know how this is all going to turn out. I don't see exactly what you're doing here. But let it be. Whatever you want, I'm willing to do. I surrender to your will. It's hard to do, and some of you out there are thinking, well, I'm not controlling, I'm just aggressively helpful. I'm just thoroughly organized. I just drink my coffee and make my list and let's go, let's get it done, right? Some of you are that way. Some of you, if you do a project, when you show up, if the project's not underway, it's going to get underway real soon, right? You just don't mess around. You want to make sure that everybody in your life is doing exactly what you want to make sure your kids are dressed just right, that their hair is combed, that they get into the right school, the right college, marry the right person, that your spouse knows where to go and what time to be there and what to wear and what to say and what not to say, and if they don't say the right thing, you'll finish their sentences for them. Did I just describe any of you out there? And some of you are even to the point where you just get so used to being that way that you're just going to tell God how it needs to be too. We just get so in the, I've done that, I'm getting my life squared away. I'm tired of feeling out of control. I'm tired of feeling chaotic. Has your life ever felt chaotic? Do you think Mary's life felt a little chaotic at this point? Yeah. So you're going to tell God, here's how it's going to be. What do you think God thinks when we start telling him how things are going to be? Think he laughs? Yeah? I think he does. So what are some of the things that we like to control? I think for me, I know I've talked a lot in this series about social media. I think social media, if we're on there and we use it a lot, we get to the point where we want to control our image, don't we? We want to control how other people see us. Have you ever felt that way? You want to control how the world sees you. And so we don't put pictures on there, like I talked about last week, we don't put ugly pictures on there, do we? I remember taking a picture one time and showing it to Angel, and she said, do not put that on Facebook. It was of me, not of her. But have you ever done that? Have you ever showed someone a picture and they said, do not put that. Do not put that on there. Yeah. We're afraid. We're afraid of what people might think of us. What are some other things that we want to control? We want to control other people. Other people. It's hard to control other people sometimes, isn't it? It's even hard to control our own children when they're young, and then when they get old, they're liable to marry somebody that we don't like, someone we don't approve of. They're liable to let their kids do things that we don't think they ought to be letting them do, right? Those of you who have kids, It's fun when your parents tell you how to raise your kids, isn't it? And you go, do you remember? Do you remember how I was raised? And then you have these conversations. I've heard. I've never had one, but I've heard of these conversations where you say, mom and dad, grandma and grandpa say, you shouldn't let your kid do that, and then you say, you've forgotten how I was raised and what you let me do, and you must think your grandkids are more important than me. And I've had a few of those probably conversations. So it's hard. It's hard to pray the prayer that Mary prayed and say, Lord, let it be. Mary had to make a choice. Mary had to make a choice between her plans and God's plans. Have you ever had to make that choice? Mary had to make a choice between her dreams and God's destiny for her. Have you ever had to make that choice? Have your dreams for your own life ever come up against God's plan, God's destiny for you? Maybe your dreams for your children's lives have come up against your dreams, your destiny for them. I've heard stories about children being called to mission work and parents absolutely throwing a fit, because even though God has called their children to missions, that means that their dreams for how their grandchildren are going to be raised are shattered or are going to be different. They're not going to be able to see them, be around them. Maybe you've had to make that decision to let go of that. Mary had to make a choice between her desire to control her own life and God's call on her life. I know many times I've seen God's call on the lives of people be refused. When we talk about God's call, a lot of times our minds go to, the professional Christians, the professional believers who are their occupation is to be. Sometimes I think people think that my occupation is to be a Christian. I get paid to be a Christian. No. We all have a call on our life. Now, your call may or may not involve vocational ministry, but you're called to serve God just the same. We're all called. And sometimes we have a choice between following God's call and controlling our own lives. Because sometimes following God's call makes us feel out of control. Sometimes we're called to do things we don't feel comfortable doing. Has God ever called you to do something you don't feel comfortable doing? Do you think Mary felt comfortable going and telling her fiancé, her betrothed, hey, I'm pregnant, but it's okay. It's God's baby. She didn't necessarily understand. I like the song, Mary, Did You Know? But I can't help every time I hear it thinking, yeah, she did. She did know. She may not have understood. I think, but that doesn't make as catchy a tune, does it? Mary, did you understand? She chose to trust that God's purpose was best for her life. So what are you trying to control that's out of your control? What do you need to surrender? What are you holding so tightly that you can't give it to God? I don't know what it is in your life. I know some of the things that it is in my life. But you know, there's no such thing as partial surrender to God. We try that, don't we? We try partial surrender. This word surrender, I think it's not necessarily always the best word for what we're talking about. I think a better word might be abdication. Now, when I say the word abdication, what do you think about? I think about kings and queens. They're the only people I can think of that actually abdicate. What do they abdicate? They abdicate their throne, right? Can you guys think of an instance where a king has abdicated their throne? What was the English king back in the early 20th century that wanted to marry an American divorced woman? Was it Edward the Eighth, I think, maybe? You guys, nobody's that old in here? Oh, okay. Yeah, right. Some of you are, you're just not going to admit it. That's okay. Was it in the 30s or 40s, I think? The English king, he fell in love with an American lady, and she'd been divorced, and at the time you just didn't do that was unseemly. And so he abdicated his throne. He said, I'm not going to be the king of England or the king of Great Britain. I want to marry who I want to marry. So he gave up his throne so that he could. I hope she was worth it. Just, really, I mean, you give up being the king of England. But sometimes, see, there's no halfway abdication. He could not have said, I believe it was Edward the something. He could not have said, I'm only going to be king on Wednesdays. That doesn't work, does it? He could not have said, well, I'm going to give up my throne for a couple of years and try this marriage to this woman, but if I don't like it, I'm going to come back and I'll be king. I'll take the throne. But that doesn't work, does it? When you abdicate the throne of your life, you give it up. You say, Jesus, my life, I'm not running it as good as you can. I'm going to give it over to you. I want to give up the right to rule to you because, well, you're God and you'll do it better than me and you deserve it and I don't. I'm giving my life over to you. When we abdicate the throne of our life, there's no halfway measure. There's no, Jesus, you have this stuff and I'll keep this stuff. There's no, Jesus, you saved my soul, but I'll run my family. No. There's no, Jesus, you can have all of my life except for my kids. I want to be in charge of my own kids. No. No, that doesn't work. You give Jesus all or none. It's all or none. Desire to control is rooted in a lack of faith. Let me say that again. Desire to control is rooted in a lack of faith. We don't trust God. We're afraid of what He might do, what He might ask us to do, what He might call us to do, what we might have to give up. And we overestimate our own ability to control. We say, God, I know better how to run my life. Now, we might not say that out loud, but that's really what our hearts are thinking. You see, we don't really even have the power to control our own lives, do we? We like to think we can be in control, but we really can't. Now, we can control some things. We can control our immediate, and we can make things better. And I'm not talking about some kind of nihilism where we just throw up our hands and say, well, Let go and let God. I'm not even going to try anymore, God. That's not what I'm talking about. We have a responsibility because of our calling to serve God by obeying His commands, by taking care of our families, by taking care of those around us and ourselves, and keeping ourselves healthy and not eating all the cookies that people bring us for Christmas and all that stuff. But so I'm not talking. Some people just say, "Well, God will take care of it. I'm not even going to try." That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about saying, "God, what is your plan? It's better than mine, and I'm willing to follow it." You don't have the power to control, but you do have the power to surrender, to abdicate, to say, "God, this is yours. What would you have me to do?" As Mary said, "Let it be, I am your servant. I am your slave." You see, everything in our culture invites us to take charge, doesn't it? We're a pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps kind of culture. Several years ago, do you guys remember when Barack Obama said something about how small businesses and small business owners, he was talking about small business owners and who owned businesses, and he said, "You didn't create that business by yourself." You guys remember that? Do you remember the awful stir it caused? The point he was trying to make, of course, was that in America we have infrastructure that allows people to create business. We have laws and roads and electricity and all that stuff that helps people who own businesses to create their business. And he was trying to make that point, but he didn't make it very well. And he made a lot of people mad, because in this country we like to think that we are our own men, our own women. We can do it by ourselves. We don't need anybody else's help. That's how we like to feel, isn't it? We don't pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps kind of country, kind of culture. Control your own destiny. You only live once. YOLO or whatever. Take charge. Live life. Some of you old people will remember what and I'm including myself when I say that. The old commercial, grab all the gusto. What was that a commercial for? Budweiser? Yeah.
I mean, I'm just,
No, yeah. I remember the commercial. I just didn't remember what it was for. But and beer commercials are a prime example of this, right? They like to say, "You're a rugged individual, right? And you deserve to have a cold one or whatever. Because you work hard, And that's how you sell stuff to us Americans, right? Is to say what we like. Our own self-image is, I'm my own person. I don't need anybody else. Well, those of us who follow Jesus, we don't belong to ourselves. We belong to God. We belong to Him. To follow Jesus is surrender control. What did Jesus tell His followers? To find your life, you must lose it. You must give it up. Those who would be first must be last. That's who we are. We're not rugged individuals. We're servants. We're slaves. The bad news is surrender is not a one-time event. I have to do it every morning. Don't you? Every morning I'm tempted to say, "Today is my day, God. Today I'm going to do what I want to do." Every morning I have to surrender. Don't you think Mary had to do the same? Don't you think that prayer that she prayed, "Lord, let it be, I am your servant." Do you think that was a one-time prayer as Jesus was born and grew up? Some of you mamas out there, don't you have baby boys? Don't you think Mary had to pray that every day of Jesus' life? Lord, I give him to you. He's not mine. He's yours. Don't you think when Jesus went missing and they found him in the temple, Mary had to pray, Lord, this is your kid. Have you ever prayed that? Lord, this is your kid. You better take hold of him. I'm fixing to. Don't you think when Jesus was on his way to the cross, Mary had to surrender? Lord, I don't like this. He's my son, but he's yours. Let it be. So, we have the choice of the illusion of control or the surrender to the Most High. That's our choice. I invite you this morning to experience one of the most freeing things you can ever do in your life. To surrender control. To let go of what you cannot change for something you cannot lose. Trust God. Let it be. You don't always have the power to control your life, but you always have the choice to surrender to God. God can do way more with your surrender than you can do with your control.